My name is May. I'm a licensed nurse from the Philippines, but for years, I worked as a domestic helper in Australia. It wasn't my first choice, but when survival is on the line, dreams sometimes have to wait. I left home with a single, clear goal: save enough money to give my family a better life. Every single dollar was accounted for rent, money to send home, and whatever little I could tuck away for savings. I worked every job I could find. Cleaning offices late at night, babysitting on weekends, and sometimes, jobs I technically wasn't supposed to be doing. I kept telling myself it was all temporary, that every sacrifice would eventually make sense. Back home, my father, Celso, had his own dream. He believed family should be together, no matter what. His biggest hope was for me to reunite everyone, especially my estranged mother, Lita. She had remarried an Australian man named Wayne, and my father imagined she was living a happy new life. But the truth was far more complicated, and her story wasn't the fairy tale he envisioned. I felt constantly torn, caught between my own ambitions and my family's deep-seated expectations. And then, I met Chris. He was Filipino too, a bartender in Sydney with a kind of careless charm. He was the type of guy who used jokes to sidestep anything serious. We met one night when I was helping a friend promote a bar event, another one of those jobs I shouldn't have been doing. Suddenly, immigration officers walked into the bar for an inspection. Panic seized me. I was frozen. Without a second thought, I turned to Chris, who was standing nearby, and kissed him. It was short, awkward, and born out of pure desperation. The officers didn't give us a second glance. After they left, I tried to just walk away, to pretend it never happened. But Chris followed me outside, laughing nervously. He asked for my name. I brushed him off, telling him I wasn't interested and that I didn't have time for trouble. But life has a funny way of pushing people together, especially when they're already on the verge of breaking. A few days later, I had a humiliating visit with my mother. It was a painful reminder of everything I hadn't yet achieved. To make things worse, I ran into my ex-boyfriend, who is now married and settled. The weight of it all was crushing. That night, loneliness got the better of me. I ended up in a cheap motel room with Chris, but when the moment came to cross that line, I just couldn't. Instead, I started to cry. I told him everything about my dreams, my exhaustion, my constant fear of returning home with nothing to show for it. Chris didn't try to comfort me with empty gestures. He just sat on the floor and listened. Then he confessed something himself. He admitted he was lost, jumping from one woman to the next because he didn't know who he was without someone else's attention. So we made a deal. It wasn't about love or promises. It was just about support and honesty, until the day I left Australia. Chris helped me get a legal job, washing dishes at the bar where he worked. We started spending our quiet nights after shifts just talking, sharing cheap meals, and walking through the city streets. Suddenly, Sydney felt a little less lonely. But just as I started to feel a sense of stability, reality came crashing down. Chris disappeared for days. When I finally tracked him down at his family's home, I learned the truth. Years ago, he had followed a woman overseas, overstayed his visa, and was forced to come back to Australia after it all fell apart. He had abandoned his family, leaving his younger brother to care for their sick father. His brother never forgave him. The charm I saw was just a mask for a deep, lingering guilt. Our connection deepened, not because things were easy, but because they were honest. Around that time, I decided to join a small community pageant for migrant workers. I didn't do it for the crown, but for the confidence I desperately needed. I ended up placing second. And in the crowd, Chris was clapping the loudest. But then I saw her, his ex-girlfriend, the one he'd followed overseas. A wave of jealousy and insecurity washed over me. Later, Chris reassured me. And for the first time, he told me he wanted something real. He shared his dream with me, to open his own small Filipino bar someday, something he could build honestly, with his own two hands. Just when I thought things were looking up, my life took another sharp turn. I found out that my mother was still being abused in her marriage. And then came the most heartbreaking revelation. She admitted she had never loved my father. Her marriage to him had been a matter of survival, not love. Hearing this, my father finally let go of his dream of reuniting our family. And with that, my own plans, my own reasons for being in Australia, started to shift. Chris asked me to stay. Not forever, just a little longer. He asked me to pretend to invest in his bar, to give him the push he needed to finally start his dream. For the very first time, I was faced with a choice between love and the dream I had sacrificed so much for. And I couldn't choose love. I told him that Australia was never my final destination. It was just a bridge to get me where I needed to go. I had to keep moving forward, even if it meant I had to walk alone. Chris didn't argue. He didn't try to stop me. Instead, he took that time to reconcile with his family. And in my last few weeks in Australia, we became tourists in a city that had once felt like a battleground for survival. We explored, we laughed, and we said our goodbyes without the weight of forever. At the airport, there were no grand promises. He just told me that when he finally opens his bar, he'll name it May's Place. Not to claim me, he said, but as a token of gratitude. I promised him I'd come back to visit one day. As the plane took off, tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of loss. They were tears of relief, of strength, because after years of living for everyone else, I was finally choosing myself. Thank you for listening to my story.